The views and opinions expressed in the following paid pre-recorded program are those of the host, callers, and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the station, its management, or its owners.
Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC. Kestra IS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC. Kestra AS, an affiliate of Kestra IS. Capital Advisory Group, Inc. is not affiliated with Kestra IS or Kestra AS. Neither Kestra IS nor Kestra AS provide legal or tax advice and are not certified public accounting firms.
You work hard for your money. For the next hour, you're going to learn how to keep what's yours. Capital Advisory Group presents Keep What's Yours. Here are Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Hello and welcome to the program. It is Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. My name is Josh Gilbert, and I'm sitting here with Jeff Zufall, Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Advisor with Capital Advisory Group. And Jeff, how are you?
I am awesome. It's a beautiful Saturday.
Yeah, you sound a little.
Yeah, we got a little head cold going, but it's okay.
So me and Jeff, pull the curtain back. Me and Jeff have, we're simpatico on this because I've got a 3.5-year-old who goes to daycare, and he comes home with any number of things.
Yes.
And the first thing he wants to do is give Daddy a kiss when he gets home. And so, whoa, you know,
stand back.
You're playing Russian roulette every time.
Exactly.
You get close to him. But Jeff's got grandkids.
Yes.
And they're coming back with the same.
And they bring stuff in by the groves. So
yeah. So it's one of those things where you just have to deal with it. And, Jeff, I bet for a while, once your kids were, grown and before they started having kids, you were like, boy, I've never felt healthier in my life.
Exactly, yeah. Didn't have to do anything. I worked all the time, but never had the flu, never had the sniffles. And now, literally, they show up every weekend. There's a kid at our house, and then I get sick 3 days later.
Walgreens announced that they're going to be closing a bunch of stores.
Yes.
For whatever reason, we'll find out where those stores are at.
20% of all the
they
Walgreens.
Have 8,600 Walgreens.
Yes.
And, I'm thinking to myself, boy, that number seems low.
No,
considering
that's
see
a lot.
Them
They're everywhere.
But, yeah, that's a huge number. And they're going to close 20% of them, and we don't really know exactly why.
They haven't announced. They're just saying they're underperforming stores. Which means maybe they're like the one that I know for a fact that they are already closed was the one at Baxter in Manchester, which is I'll say relatively newer store. Has announced they're going to close it one day.
Wow,
Boom.
That's weird.
And it's right there. I mean, there's thousands of cars
Manchester,
a day.
I got to tell you, Manchester. I grew up in North County, and it was always Lindbergh.
Yeah.
But try to drive down Manchester.
Never.
Any time of day.
You got to know the side streets, the cheat, and never touch Manchester or cross it and go the other side. And
you go to Manchester through De Pere, heading into Glendale and all that. They don't have turn lanes.
Nope.
So if somebody's got to stop and make
takes
a turn,
3 days to get through
we're all
it.
piling up behind them. Boy, Manchester is such a nightmare. But even with all that traffic, the Walgreens there has closed, or is in the process of closing.
Oh, it's closed. It's empty. They've emptied the store out.
Wow.
So signs are down. The
they're
whole
not.
shoot match.
They're not infallible.
No, not at all.
We're going to talk about the economy in just a second. So maybe
that also goes back a little ways. There were real estate investment trusts back in the day that all they did was create Walgreens and CVS's. And so the developers went out and created these. They found the locations. They built the stores. And then Walgreens rented it from this real estate.
What a great tenant.
And they made tons and tons of money back in the day.
Sure.
And then after they saturated the market, pretty much that game's over.
A lot of the talk that we have about Red Lobster
Yes,
and Sears
same
before
concept.
that,
Yeah.
they sold off the land because that was the most valuable piece of Sears and Red Lobster, and now they're in trouble because they got to pay rent.
Yep.
You don't think Walgreens owns, building and lot, Johnny Londoff?
Well, it's what's called triple net, which means whoever the real estate investment company, they rent from that real estate investment company. So they pay rent to them on a regular basis. They don't own it, but they do have a contractual lease on it, and they're triple net, which means if the AC goes out, Walgreens has to pay for it. If the parking lot needs to be improved, Walgreens pays for it. So it catches up over time to them. So
I was listening to some show one time, real estate show. I'm fascinated with real estate.
Mm-hmm.
If I had even an ounce of organization skills, I think I would be a real estate agent. But I don't. So here I am doing radio. But he said own grocery stores.
Yeah.
That's where the money is because they rarely close.
Yeah.
No shop and safety.
Yeah.
But they sold. And
They
now they're
sold.
Schnucks
That's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah, but he said that money, how much does it cost to buy a grocery store and lease it to
a
Schnucks
bunch.
or Deerbergs? A bunch.
And there were REITs, which are real estate investment trusts, that did that exact same concept. They would buy a Schnucks Plaza. It has the main, Schnucks grocery store with outlying buildings, and usually it went like Schnucks was, 80% of the revenue. The other 10% came from the outliers, which were Fortune 100 companies like an AT&T and stuff like that. And then you might have a bank out in the parking lot.
A GameStop.
And all those things have done very well that are the necessity-based REITs that are strictly, it's not strip centers, it's strictly grocery stores because it's necessity-based. So...
well, that's not really what we're talking about today. I was just going to mention that the Walgreens that are by our houses, I don't know how they're doing on the whole, but as far as Dayquil sales go, they are
through the roof. Yep. And what is it? I bought Sudafed. I think I bought a box of Sudafed, and I never realized you have to show your driver's license.
Oh, yeah.
To get that. And I'm like, no, I'm not making crack. I just want to get better.
Out in St. Charles, I have to drive into the county. I live out in Newtown, St. Charles, and you try to buy Sudafed, you have to have a prescription.
Seriously?
Yes.
Oh.
So I can't even buy it. I can't even go to the counter and buy it.
I thought it was funny when I went in Walgreens and said, hey, I bought it. They're like, give me your license, and they actually typed my information in.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, what's that for?
I always drive in on the way to work and pick it up when I need it because it's still a let me see your ID process. It's behind the counter, but at least I can still buy it without a prescription.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So all that to say, welcome to the show. It's Capital Advisory Group. That's Jeff Zufall. It's Keep What's Yours, 636-394-5524 if you want to get in touch with Jeff. And I've got to apologize. Normally, when we do the show, we kind of meet up ahead of time and just kind of discuss what we're going to talk about. But on my way out of the house, rushing, I see a sink full of dirty dishes. And
that's when you just keep running.
No, I know. If I leave that and she comes home with the baby and she sees this, and it was starting to turn. It was starting to walk by and you go, whoa.
Yeah.
What did we cook in that pot? So I was like, you know what? I have to do this. And then, of course, when you want to do the dishes, the dishwasher's already full.
Sure it is.
So then I had to unload the dishes and load it up. So, Jeff, I appreciate your time. But the wife comes first.
That's fine. Perfectly fine.
I'm sure you can understand.
Oh, no, I do. Usually I'm like, what sink? Where's the kitchen at? What?
Right, yeah. And, and then she'll say, well, you didn't empty the litter box. She's listening right now, I'm sure. The litter box is still full.
That's right.
No, I did not do that. But, Jeff, thanks for bearing with me here. I do want to talk about the economy.
Yes.
And we were discussing on behind the scenes, and I had heard McGraw talking during the morning show last week, and somebody had just called in and said, this economy stinks.
Yes.
They do all sorts of political stuff. We don't get into the politics of any of this stuff. We just talk about this is the way it is, and here's what's proposed, and we'll see who wins and go from there. But this economy stinks. I'm having a hard time. Da, 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 da. And then the next phone call said, I was just at the fireworks stand.
Yeah.
And somebody ahead of me just bought $3,000 worth of fireworks.
Yes. And you go, wait a minute.
Yeah. How bad is the economy if people are
still doing that?
Our sales are through the roof this year. Somebody that owned a fireworks stand called in a little bit later and said sales get better every single year.
Yeah. So that's the question of the day. If you look at it, you could see two sides of that equation, and it's almost like a tale of two cities. There's one section where you're saying, hey, depending upon industries, et cetera, and it looks bleak. The flip side of that is there's more from an unemployment standpoint. Unemployment hypothetically is low. Again, some of those numbers are skewed from the government. Roll with it. I mean, that's they can't just all of a sudden change the way they report that. But again, the question is this just a strong economy? We have all-time highs in the market. We've hit 2 or 3 different highs over the last couple of months. Lower unemployment. And it seems that we don't see these big mass layoffs like we did in the past. And I say, way back in the day where, 5,000 people or 10,000 people lost their jobs. At least not yet. So the question is this really a strong economy? It seems like all data that is thrown out there, good or bad, the market shrugs it off and keeps.
They hit 40,000.
Yes, and keeps going higher. So is it really a strong economy? Or, here's the side question, and nobody can answer this. Is it really that, or is it the Fed behind the scenes tinkering with the economy? Everybody's waiting for the Fed to again, at the end of last year, 2023, Fed said they were going to decrease interest rates 4 times this year. And you go, what? Where'd that come from? And to their defense, they said only if they have the ability to do it, they wanted to be able to do that and not make a political statement on it, which you go, okay, good. But we're sitting, midsummer, and there's no way in the world they can. So the Vegas odds are pushing towards they meet September, and they meet the week after the election in November. And there is I think it's an 86% chance that in November they actually will, if they can, lower rates or start lowering rates then. So maybe it's in November, December. So the concept behind that is whoever wins the election will have this tailwind in a sense, because if the Fed starts lowering interest rates, the market goes crazy, because that's what everybody's been waiting for. So, but there's also that remote chance that they raise rates too between now and then.
Right.
And it's a small remote chance, but it could happen, honestly.
And inflation is the issue.
Inflation is the issue, period, end of story. And how to fix it, that's way out of my pay grade. And I mean way out of my pay grade. And I think the Fed's even struggling with that a little bit, saying, with the mantra of higher for longer, which means they're going to we're going to be, 24, 28 months at, sky-high interest rates. It does slow a lot of other, housing market. SBA loans are insane from what they'll quote you for an interest rate. You go to your line of credit, you're 7%, 8%. It's the norm historically. But for us to be, hey, we just came through a negative interest rate scenario, kind of makes everybody sit back and go, wait a minute, So that's kind of where we sit. So that's the question: is this really a strong economy, or is the Fed tinkering with it on the backside to kind of keep it functioning going forward?
Well, I'll tell you personally, we are feeling it at the grocery store, just like everybody else who has gone shopping and actually looked at their credit card statements. If you go to dinner, go out to eat. Every place you go, it's crazy numbers to eat. And it's like, wait a minute, McDonald's, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. So you're starting to see people that are starting to pull back a little bit, but you still got to pay the piper when you go to the grocery store. You got to eat anyway. Unavoidable.
Yes.
So it's one of these things where, I call it the Yogi Berra economy. What did he say famously? No one goes there. It's too crowded.
Yeah.
Okay. We're feeling it at the grocery store. It is inflation. Inflation is there. The rates are up. The housing cost of housing is through the roof. In that sense, that the grocery store is too expensive. I can't buy a house. I can't sell my house because I got a good rate and I'm stuck. I don't want to pay. So the economy stinks because people keep spending money.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
If the economy was so bad, people wouldn't be spending money.
Exactly.
And it's just like, what bizarro world are
we are?
in?
There's a lot of weird numbers that are being tossed around out there. And you would assume that some of the data that comes from economics would stun the economy or slow the market, and it doesn't, just goes right on past it. So, is it the fact that everybody is watching their 401k balance go up and up and up? And yeah, in March, April of this year, we kind of had a little downturn in the market, and you watched your account balance dipped a little bit, and then the market just keep going crazy. So
I look at, not at my account, but I look at the market every day. Should I not do that?
now you watch the market in general, but don't look at the Dow. Everybody, if you watch every news broadcast says the Dow was up, the Dow was down, up 300 points, down 500 points. That's 30 companies and 30 companies only out of
I was
the entire
stunned.
market.
I was stunned when I learned that,
Yeah.
and it was just since I started talking to you, stunned that the Dow is only 30 companies.
Yeah.
How could that be a barometer?
It's the biggest of the big. Okay, so it's the big guys out
Like
there.
who? Is Walgreens there?
No,
They just got
Walmart,
kicked out, yeah.
kicked out. Walmart, Home Depot, healthcare companies, and it's the biggest of the big.
Apple.
Apple's in there. So the key to it, though, is look at the S&P 500. That's the economy. That's the gauge. And technically, it's 500 of the biggest U.S. domestic companies out there. Give or take, if there's mergers and acquisitions, there might be a short-lived time where it's not really 500 companies. It might be 498 because of a merger or acquisition. But that's what you want to watch. Or a bigger, broader example would be like the Russell 1000 or the Russell 2000. So it puts literally 1,000 companies or 2,000 companies. The problem is when you start to look at the broader market that way, the less volatile it becomes, and it becomes a boring number. So the S&P was up, 47 points yesterday or something like that. It might equate to an eighth of a point. But the Dow was up 400 or it was down 400. It's makes good PR.
Yeah, and the S&P is up quite a bit
Oh,
over
yeah.
the last year. So
Yeah.
it's just hard to say when you hear this economy stinks. Well, it does stink for some people. It stinks
Yes.
for a lot of people, I bet.
Yeah.
And it stinks for me when I go to the grocery store, and it
Yeah.
stinks for me
Inflation, I think, is the issue, is the big issue. And again, there was a stat I saw, maybe I heard it, I didn't read it. And they basically said that housing, I think from 2020 to today, and it was kind of universal, housing cost for the cost of a home was up 46%.
That's insane.
So if you go, hey, wait a minute, let me go look at what the value of my house is today, yeah, it's an astronomical number. But when you sell it, where are you going to go live?
Where am I living now?
And you're still going to pay the piper because now you might be at a 2.5 or 2.7 interest rate. And then if you got to go buy a new one
Right.
and downsize.
I'm not renting.
Yeah,
that's
you're
for
going
sure.
to end up paying 6, 7, I think, in a rate. So you go, I'll just stay where I'm at. And I think that's what's taking place in America is everybody's kind of, unless you're forced to move, job changes or something like that, then you go ahead and pay the piper and go.
Before we go to break, was the bubble because the houses got too expensive, or was the bubble because they kept loaning people money on these jumbo loans? Or?
The bubble was basically the 10 weirdest things that could happen on a Wednesday and a Thursday happened. And Bear Stearns looked at, I think it was Bear Stearns looked at J.P. Morgan, or J.P. Morgan looked at Bear Stearns and said, we're not loaning you money overnight, and boom, game over. And literally it was a credit crunch. And then when it was all said and done, yes, the issue was they were loaning money to people. I mean, there was examples that we saw that even with their income reported on the form, that they couldn't make the first payment when they got the loan.
And they were still giving
And
them
they
the loan.
still were given a $400,000 loan to go buy this house. But the mantra kind of goes back to both political parties back in the day, and it was we wanted to increase home ownership in America. Republicans and Democrats are both guilty of it. And whatever it took to get that number up to make it look good is what they did. And it came back to bite us heavily.
Yeah.
It was a complete collapse of the financial system because it was more of financial where banks weren't loaning money. There was what's his name, Bernanke, went before Congress and said, we need a blank check. And they said, what for? And he said, if we don't get a blank check, Nobody's debit card's going to work tomorrow. And they went,
worry about
okay. And still to today, I don't think they know the exact dollars that were spent where they went and bailed companies, AIG as a prime, which AIG doesn't go by AIG anymore. They go by Corebridge just because the AIG name, I guess, has tainted a bit. And they basically asked for, I think, don't quote me on this, $180 billion, $180 million, something like that. It was a crazy number, and they got it. So
too big to fail, huh?
Yeah, way too big. And so that was the beginning. Now they paid that money back over time. There's been a shareholder revolt. There's a guy named Hank Greenberg that owned the bulk of AIG shares. He pretty much lost his fortune, but that's kind of how it goes.
Sure.
So,
all right. So the economy is still red hot.
Mm-hmm.
People are still spending money, but everybody thinks it stinks.
Yeah.
So,
and the kicker will be it will stink pretty quick if people start getting laid off. And that's one of the things that's out there that we haven't seen yet. If we start seeing mass layoffs, then it's pretty much going to really quickly slow down the economy.
were they predicting a couple of years ago that mass layoffs were coming?
Yes.
With the rate hikes, and did they come?
No.
Okay.
I mean, there was a bunch of companies. Kind of goes back to the stuff that took place in California, where the minimum wage skyrocketed. There was a bunch of, restaurants that shut down. Just mathematically, they can't make it work. Again, that's a business model issue, and they just threw the towel in and quit. But again, the mass layoffs, we haven't seen that. Like
Fortune 500, Fortune 1,000 companies, they're not.
Where they come in and just, wipe out and say, hey, 5,000 people are going to lose their job today. And that happens repeatedly across the country.
Have there been hiring freezes?
There has been. I think it's more budgetary than anything.
Oh, okay.
City of St. Louis had, I think it might even be going on now, they froze no new hires.
They need to hire some police.
Yeah, they do, but they're
sanitation department
trying
workers.
to work out their budget.
But
again,
that's an inter-office issue. That's not too much of a sign of the times.
No, not at all. That's more just big picture what they got going on in the city. They're trying to get it under wraps. So they just said hiring freeze, don't hire anybody until we figure this out.
Have they said where they put that Rams money?
No, not yet.
Like, is it? But have they said that investment wise?
No,
they should put it in the S&P. Frankly.
No, they can't do that because they can't put it at risk.
Oh, okay.
Just in case one day the market the bottom falls out.
Sure.
You always have to be aware of that. So they do.
Got to go in a safe.
They put it in a money market. I think they said an interest bearing. They didn't say what it was, but anywhere between 3 or 5% would be the norm. So they're making good money on it while they kind of put this together as what to do with it.
Let me ask you this before we go to commercial break, because we are way overdue. Me coming off the street, I'm not the city of St. Louis. I'm not Tashara Jones. I don't have $700 million.
Mm-hmm.
I think they only have like $300.
Yeah.
After they paid the lawyers,
yeah,
and gave
lawyers
Sam Page
got a
some
nice,
money.
yeah. County got some too. So.
Yeah. So let's just call it $300 million. I don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
But I want a safe, no risk investment to park $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
What's the best rate of return that you have seen these days?
Money market.
And how much?
Money market, no risk. You're talking somewhere between 4.7, and it does move every Monday. They come out with a new rate, 4.7 to as high as 5.1.
And is that locked in for a certain number of?
Yeah, for that week.
Oh, no,
so it would be.
But is my money stuck there?
Not at all. It's completely. The bulk of them, I will say, are completely liquid, which means you put it in, you can take it right back out the next day. So that's where you would use your safe money, if you want to call it that, is. And that's the trick, is a lot of people do not realize this. 2 years ago, you got zero on your cash. So to put money in a bank or sit on it in a checking account or a savings account was crazy because you were losing money on it, technically, because of inflation. Now, all of a sudden, we're seeing 1099, what's called 1099 INTs, which is interest that is paid from the bank, and that's 5 times what it was last year. And you go, wait a minute, I got $400 in interest over the last couple of years. Now it's, $1,200, and you pay tax on it. So the good news is, yes, you can be a cash investor today and make a favorable rate, and you can actually see your money making money, cash, no risk, liquid. But at the end of the day, you get a 1099, you're going to pay tax on it.
Yeah.
So people are paying more tax.
Is there is there something that I could do with that money that would be smarter? I mean, I always ask you this. There are people that put money into a 401k, put money into a Roth, but you're capped at a certain point.
From a limit, yeah.
And then the rest, I said, well, Jeff, what if I'm really wealthy and I've got a lot more money? Where do I put it? And you say, you got to put it in the market.
Yeah, put it in a brokerage account. Again, it depends on the individual's circumstances, what your risk tolerance is. And again, we lose the sight of this as we go forward because it's kind of I'll say the side effect of a really good market. And everybody thinks that, I just buy and you'll never lose money. You're going to make money forever and ever and ever. The problem is you really have to take your risk tolerance into consideration because the shoe could drop at any point in time, which means the S&P, the Dow drops 10%.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
That seems to me pretty risky.
Exactly. So that's why I say and so it depends upon the individual's personal situation, which says, what's my time horizon? This $2,000. I don't need it for 10 years. Market comes into play. But if you go, I might need it next year, don't put it in the market.
Yeah.
Don't even touch it. Go cash, sit. Before you were forced to be an investor because you couldn't make money with cash sitting on the sidelines. And again, the question is, at what point in time in today's economic, do you pull money from cash to go to the market? And right now, you really don't have to. You could sit in cash. People that have CDs, or I say the older generations are now CD shopping again. You can go around town, see who's got the best rates, and you're talking decent rates as you go forward.
And that's why you should have an ongoing conversation.
Yes.
With your money manager and
Exactly.
your tax guy.
Yeah.
And lucky enough for us, Jeff is both.
Exactly.
He's your money guy. He's your wealth advisor. He's also the senior tax strategist at Capital Advisory Group. So he knows that, and is the money market, when I make money off that, does that count as income or does that count as capital gains?
No, it's ordinary income.
Ordinary income.
Because it's interest income that's paid to you.
Going to be taxed at 24% or
whatever your
30%
current
or
rate
20%.
is. Yeah.
Whatever your regular tax rate is. Jeff can tell you, number one, where you should put your money, but number two, he'll also tell you what the tax implications are. And sometimes a tax implication is greater than what you're going to get from your money, and you'll say that's a bad decision.
Exactly.
So, taking money out, money market, I'm going to take it out of this and put it over. Well, the tax hit on you taking that money out might be more than you could ever possibly gain.
And so, again, that's another issue we see this day in, day out. We have this conversation. People made really good money in the market. And so in your IRAs and your Roths, it doesn't matter because you don't pay a capital gains when you sell it. It's only when you take money out. But in your regular brokerage accounts, the question of the day is we see people sitting with hundreds of thousands of dollars in gains on these funds, mutual fund stock. And the question of the day is, at what point in time do you sell it? Or do you sell a piece of it? How do you get out of that investment? And I say get out of it, you're going to end up paying tax. So the problem is we're cruising along. Everybody thinks the market's going to go up and up and up and up. And then, boom, it hits a wall, and then you start to lose that profit. Do you sell it? Do you pay capital gains? And so that's what strategically you need to look at on an annual basis going forward.
And that's kind of like a year-to-year investment.
Yes. Depends
kind of
upon
thing.
your tax brackets, what's going on in your life. And maybe, the funny part was Apple stock, not to tout it by no means, but Apple had issues. The share price was slipping a little bit. Apple came along 3 months ago and said, hey, we're going to do a stock buyback. And it actually propped the share price up. So then you go, maybe you don't sell it. Wait and see what transpires. But again, at some point in time, what do you do with that stock? You're going to pay the tax. So
so when you should do that, and when it comes to your retirement and your traditional pre-tax IRA, your tax-deferred IRA, if you don't realize you're going to be paying taxes on that, well, then you're not playing the game right.
Exactly.
So you're going to pay tax on that. When do you take it out and move it strategically to minimize that tax burden to essentially, Jeff, keep what's yours? That's the name of the show. That's the name of the book that Jeff wrote, and that's the name of the lifestyle that we tried to live. How do I keep more of my money and less going out to the federal government in the form of taxes. Give Jeff a call, 636-394-5524, or go to CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. I always say, get an appointment on the calendar, and then go to the appointment.
Yes.
And then sitting down talking to you, I will leave with a list of things to do,
Yes.
probably.
A little homework, typically, to go find or get for us.
Right. And then I'll come back with all the documentations, and you'll say, here are your options.
Yes.
And it's all about just getting the ball rolling. So get an appointment on the calendar and head on over to Capital Advisory Group and see Jeff Zufall. We're going to go to break, and when we come back, more of Keep What's Yours on the Big 550 KTRS.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Back on the show, back to Keep What's Yours with Jeff Zufall. He is the senior tax strategist and wealth advisor with Capital Advisory Group. He does taxes. He does wealth advising. And I always say this, you want your wealth advisor to also be your tax strategist, because
Yes.
every move, every breath you take, every move you make, Jeff can see it and say, whoa, 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 whoa.
Exactly.
That's got a big tax bomb.
It's going to
attached
cost
to it.
you, and this is what it's going to cost you. And then you go, oh, okay, let's do it, or no, don't do that.
And then you
Yeah.
say, here's a better way.
Exactly.
Because that's what
Yeah.
I always bring to Jeff almost weekly. I say, hey, I got a new harebrained money-making scheme. And Jeff generally says, well, that's illegal. But here's the normal way that you
Yeah.
could do that, the legal way.
Yeah.
And I say, well, I was looking for something highly illegal.
Yeah, exactly.
But Jeff
We'll keep
says,
you out of jail.
Yeah. Guardrails. The
Yes.
guardrails in the tax system, you can go in between the two guardrails, and there's a lot of space in there to wiggle
Yeah.
around. But once you go through the guardrails, you're in the ditch, in the ravine, and that is called tax fraud.
Yeah, and it's called
And-
trouble. So, and you
Yeah.
don't want to go there. So,
And you don't want to go to jail.
Yeah.
So Jeff says there's plenty of space on the road to
Yes.
do what you want to do.
yeah.
You just have to know the tax code, and that's what Jeff does for us. A couple of interesting things that have come up are these new self-employed tax credits.
Yes. So this is something that's been out there for a while. And everybody's accustomed to the ERTC, which is the employee tax credit, which is shut down by the IRS because the fraud
Massive
is
tax fraud.
rampant.
People were driving straight through the guardrails.
Jumping off the cliff and trying to get their money. IRS said, boom, we're done. Even legitimate claims that are sitting in there, just they're dead in the water. Now, the IRS on that also created an amnesty program and said, hey, if you know you got money and you shouldn't have, pay it back. We'll call it even. We won't come after you in a couple years. So if you're that person and you said, oh, yeah, I got it from one of these 1-800 mills, I would strongly advise pay it back, because when they do get the ERTC system under control, they're going to go through case by case, and they are going to hunt people down for that money. And it won't be a pretty sight. So especially if they create an amnesty program and say pay it back, we'll call it even, you might want to pay it back.
So when you guys were going through these, you were doing them the proper way.
Yeah.
But these fly-by-night,
there was a couple of
middle of the night commercials, send us your
1-800, send us your info, we'll take care of you. We would see people then later, and they're like, well, I got 30 grand. We're like, how'd you get 30 grand? You don't make the cut. And they're
Yeah.
like, well, these guys said they
These
did.
guys made me make the cut.
Exactly. So we're like, yeah.
Yeah, they did it
so-
illegally, probably.
Yeah. So there's the ERTC that's out there. Now there is also what's called an SETC. Okay, and everybody's like, what? And it's a
Oh,
self-employed.
SCTV, I love that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's called self-employed tax credit. Okay, this is for people that are self-employed. And when I say self-employed, gig workers, if you are 1099, single member LLCs, you file a Schedule C on your tax return.
You know who you are.
Exactly. You have a credit sitting out there. The only caveat, and I say caveat to this, is you had to come down with COVID.
Oh.
So 20 and 21. Now this program will actually end in March of 2025. They're going to take it off the table. And it's not like there's X number of dollars out there, and once it's spent, you don't get it. This actually is for people that were self-employed, 20 and 21. It is sole proprietors, 1099 subcontractors, single member LLCs, Schedule C. And the biggest thing is if 20 and 21 you got COVID, you get $511 per day to offset your COVID cost. And if you took care of somebody that had COVID, you get $200 a day to take care of that up to 10 days.
Up to
So
10
you could
days.
get a quick 55. So just the $5,100, $5,110 if you basically were self-employed in 2021, you got COVID. Now, again, how to prove it, I think you just check a box on this. I haven't filled the form out yet. Just stumbled onto this the last couple of weeks. And then you get basically $2,000 for caring for a family member, or, which was true, all the schools were closed, your kids were at home, and you had to care for a child while you were at home waiting. You
Now,
get $2,000.
Is this to say you're self-employed and you got COVID and you had to quarantine for 10 days because that's what it was back
Exactly.
then, and you couldn't go to work?
Hypothetically.
That's
what it's saying.
How do you prove
Well, that's a
when
question
you
of the
had
day.
it and how many times you had it?
I guess if you really had to, you could go back to the doctor. But they're saying that it's a maximum credit of $5,110 for taxpayers if you contracted COVID. So technically, I think we got COVID November of 20, probably down 3 weeks with it. I mean, before you're back up 100%. But you can go back in and claim your $5,100. And then hypothetically, I could say I was taking care of my wife, so I get $2,000 on top of that. But the IRS knows that's a lie, so.
But right. So, but you have, because you just admitted it, you have to be a certain worker
Just
for this.
Exactly.
Like I got COVID like 3 times,
Yeah.
and I had to miss 5 days of
But
work each time.
you're hypothetically W-2'd.
I'm an employee. I'm not
And you're an
self-employed.
employee, so that's a totally different scenario. There really isn't anything for you out there. And then your partnership, in a sense, is a partnership. It doesn't count on here because it's not a single member partnership.
I have I've got an LLC.
Exactly.
Pertaining to the condo that we have, but it's not one of the LLCs that even fits in
It
this.
fits in here. You have to be
And-
self-employed.
Right. Frankly, getting, doused with COVID
Yeah.
didn't prevent me from running that
Yeah.
either.
Well,
So-
exactly. Yeah. So, again, that's what they're saying. And there's some forms you need to fill out, send into the IRS, start your claim process. So let's say that you were an Uber driver in 20 and you got COVID. Technically, you qualify for this program. So it's very liberal in what's out there. But this program does end in spring of 2025, March of 25. They're canning it. It's not out there.
Now, as I say with most of these tax benefits that come to us, it's all great and everything. Number one, nobody ever tells us about it.
Exactly.
So we don't even know they're out there. Number two, once we know they exist, there's somebody driving an Uber right now listening to this show, I
Yeah.
guarantee it, that says, oh my gosh, I got COVID twice
Yeah.
during that time period. I could probably file for this. I
Yes.
was laid up for, whatever. So they can file for this, but how do you do it?
Call us and we'll walk you through because you need to fill the form out to the IRS. There's documentation that you need to prove. You got to go back, pull your 20 or 21 tax return, prove that you were a 1099 or a subcontractor, and then go down that path. And here's the cool part. This is a tax credit, so it's what's referred to as a refundable tax credit, which means if the credit exceeds your tax liability, you get cash or a refund paid back to you. So if you have a $5,100 credit coming your way, but you only had $1,000 in taxes, you still get a $4,000 refund.
So this is
So
dollar
it's refundable. Yeah,
dollar for dollar.
exactly. Most tax credits only say, hey, it's up to your tax liability. So if you didn't have a tax liability, you got a refund at the end of the year. You really don't get anything for it. It's kind of worthless.
Right.
Whereas this is refundable, which
This
means
is
it will
cash
come
money.
cash money. So
And that's what I always, when you say tax credit, that's where I always
Yeah.
get hung up because, they'll knock your tax bill down, but if I don't have a tax bill,
then it's not
then
going to
you're
help
out of
you.
luck. Yeah. It's just, we'll go out and create a tax bill.
Exactly. And a lot of people will structure that to say, hey, back up your withholdings. lower your withholding so that it does create a tax due at the end of the year if you know you're getting like an EV credit or something like that. So
Let me ask you this. I'm getting a tax credit back, but it only goes towards taxes that I owe.
mm-hmm.
Should I go out and sell an investment and create a tax?
No, because that would be capital gain.
Okay.
So
And that doesn't count.
It doesn't count.
Capital gains tax is outside of.
Capital gains is its own little entity. The only thing that offsets a capital gain is a capital loss.
If I'm an older American and I'm retired and I can start pulling money out, or I'm getting hit with my required minimum distribution and I'm paying taxes.
That offsets.
That works.
Because that's income to you. It's ordinary income at the end of the day. It's just you got to be careful when you say, hey, I'm going to sell something. If it's in a brokerage account and it's just a taxable account, that's capital gain, capital loss. If it's
That's outside of my ordinary income tax.
Yeah, totally outside. It's max 15% or 20%, depending upon your income.
Different tax
Yes.
buckets.
Yeah.
See, this is so confusing, which is why you need someone to help you. So, again, we'll repeat. If you were a self-employed person, single member LLC,
Yeah.
if you were running a business.
Like
or,
a business from your home, anything.
Right.
Basically, you just need the income. So you need to make $5,000, not net $5,000, but just make it to where you had a 1099 greater than 5,100 or 2,000, and then basically it's a matter of filling the forms out. And got COVID. Everybody could probably go back and prove that they went to MedStop. I mean, I remember standing in line for that for 2 hours and then waiting 2 hours in the car for them to text me and go, hey, you got COVID. I'm like, oh, I knew that.
I took pictures of my tests and either sent them to my boss or sent them to my wife or whoever. So if you took pictures on your phone, I don't know if that would count. But the whole game here is, I guess, if you were self-employed and let's just say you were an Uber driver, you can't file for unemployment for the 10 days that you were sick.
Yeah, if you're self-employed, you don't really pay into it hypothetically.
Yeah.
So you can't go claim. Otherwise, everybody'd be like, "Oh, I'm unemployed. Pay me my money."
So this is kind of a way to say you missed out on work.
Yes.
Here's the government's going to come back in
and this one kind of hid in the background of the ERTC credit because it was a way bigger credit.
Mm-hmm.
And now that ERTC's done, this one's kind of now come to the forefront. Like, hey, look at me! I was hiding out here the whole time. So.
All right, well, there's that. So get on the ball. Give Jeff a call, 636-394-5524. If you were self-employed during the pandemic and you came down with COVID and couldn't work for 5 to 10 days, there might be something out there for you. And the whole game here is, number one, they never tell us about it, so you got to listen to the show to find out that these things exist. And number two, they don't make it easy to file for.
No, it's a little tricky.
So that's why Jeff is here for us, senior tax strategist and wealth advisor with Capital Advisory Group. We do the show because we want you to keep more of what's yours. Keep more of your money in your account, on your paychecks, in whatever kind of tin can you want.
Yes.
The more money you have,
Mason jar,
the better. And Jeff can tell you how to keep it. When we come back, there's a couple more things. If you've got students, there's basically some free money out there.
Sitting on the table.
We'll tell you how to get access to it. Keep what's yours with Jeff Zufall, 636-394-5524, or go to CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com.
Keep What's Yours continues with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall.
Back on the show, not a lot of time left on Keep What's Yours, but here's some really good information to take away for this week. The government has some things out there, American Opportunity Tax Credit and the Lifetime Learning Credit. Jeff, these are for students or people wanting to go back to school. What are these?
Yes. So there's 5 tax credits that most people could qualify for, which will have a major impact on your income and your tax situation. So the first one is an earned income credit. Basically, you got to be at least 25 years old, but under 65. You could be married. You could have, valid Social Security numbers, but it's an income threshold. The only, I'll say, qualifier that kicks you out of it is if you earned $11,000 or more in investment income, dividends, capital gains, so on and so forth, it disqualifies you. But it's a way that if you're lower income and you have children, you're going to get a huge refund back. So that's one of them. American Opportunity Credit, American Opportunity Tax Credit, technically. If your income is basically married filing jointly, $160,000 or less, or $80,000 or less, single, it's going to cover the 4 years of like post-secondary education, so college basically. And the kicker is you could receive up to $2,500 each year to help with your cost of qualified tuition.
So if our kids are going to college,
Yes.
and we make it less than $80,000 single, less than $160 married filing jointly, we have $2,500 a year
Coming back.
free money.
Yes.
And,
As a credit coming back for doing that.
and they don't just give it to us. I've got to sign up for this?
No, it's part of a tax return. So as you're doing the return, it comes along, picks up everybody's ages, incomes, and starts filling it out automatically.
Do I want to come into you? And
Yeah.
this is hypothetical because I don't have a kid in college yet. Do I want to come to you and say, hey, can we make sure this is on? In there?
Typically, we see the tax return, the age of the child, and tuition payments going out. That picks it up,
And you'll
it
know.
automatically
You'll-
jumps in there, and
okay.
you start doing it. And then there's also what's called lifetime learning credit. So this one basically, it's any years past post-secondary education. So if you went back to just not so much get a degree, but like you were talking about before, you went to go learn French, this counts, and it's $2,000 per student. But again, same income thresholds. But basically, once you go over those income thresholds, it phases out. You don't get it anymore.
Okay.
So the IRS is pretty slick, though.
But you were saying 80,000 or 160 married filing jointly.
Yes.
Most people are actually
They're going to be a touch above that.
Just
and
above
it
that.
knocks you out so you don't get it.
because the IRS, they know how much money we make.
They know the average of middle America. They know exactly where that threshold is, and they set this just a notch below it.
And let's be honest, if we're making really good money, we
Hypothetically,
don't necessarily
need a
deserve
credit. Yeah,
to get these credits.
hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
So, yeah. And then again, the next one is child dependent care credit. So basically, it's the big one. It can get up to as high as $3,000, for qualifying expenses. Child care. The only thing is like summertime, since it's summertime, if they go to a camp and they spend the night, it doesn't count. If you send them to camp during the day,
a day camp.
It's day camp. It's dependent
That
care. You
works.
get to write it off.
Okay.
So that's one of the things, if they ship you off to military school for a month,
Yeah.
tough toodles, they're flipping the bill.
Carney's kids are
Yeah.
at camp for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Sleep away.
And the last one is Savers Tax Credit. So this is one that basically the kicker is if you're, I say moderate income, 36.5 for single, 54 for head of household, 73 for married filing jointly, and you put money into a 401k, an IRA, and take a tax deduction for it, it's a savers credit, and it's basically going to go $1,000 for single and as high as $2,000 for married filing jointly. So literally, if your income hits this threshold, you put $2,000 into a 401k. Hypothetically, you get a $2,000 tax credit, and you go, that's free money going into your retirement plan.
And is that again on your tax return? If my tax returns, I'm getting $900 back. This $2,000 tax credit bumps it up to $2,900.
Exactly.
And this is free money,
Free money.
but
You have to hit that income threshold is the kicker.
And I don't know where America lands. And the hardest part about not making a lot of money is I don't have a lot of money to save
put away.
for
Exactly.
retirement.
Yeah.
So the government's saying if you fall into this threshold, 36.5 single, 73 married filing jointly, or had a household $54,000, listening
help you
at
out.
home, do you fall into this camp?
Yeah.
And have you said, well, I don't make enough money to even, I'm having trouble paying my bills. Sock away some money.
And look at it from a standpoint, if you did $50 a month, $600 a year, the pre-tax side of that, if you did it pre-tax, really it doesn't cost you $50. It might cost you $42. And that's what it's going to affect your take home. But you put that $50 in, you're going to get a $600 credit at the end of the year
government
to
will give
offset.
it right back to
Yes,
you.
up to $1,000 single and up to $2,000 married filing jointly.
But you want to do it safe, you want to do
Yeah.
it the right way, and you want to make sure that you're still putting food on the table.
Exactly, because you got to
and
pay the
putting
bills.
gas in the car.
Yep. Yeah.
But if you've got $50 every paycheck or $100 every paycheck,
Going into
the government will give it right back to you on April 15th.
Yep. As soon as you file your tax return, you get it back as a credit.
But only up to 1,000 single, 2,000 married filing jointly.
And that's what's called Saver's Tax Credit.
How do we actually implement this into our plan? You call Jeff Zufall, 636-394-5524. People listening right now, if you fall into any one of these categories, you've got kids in school, you want to go back to school, you are a lower income earner and you want to save but you just don't have enough money, the government will float you $1,000 or so. How do I implement it? You call Jeff Zufall, 636-394-5524 or CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. Jeff Zufall, Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Advisor with Capital Advisory Group. It's Keep What's Yours, telling you how to keep more of your money by using the tax code to your benefit. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you. See you next week.
You've been listening to Keep What's Yours with Josh Gilbert and Jeff Zufall, Senior Tax Strategist and Wealth Manager at Capital Advisory Group. To learn more, call 636-394-5524 or visit CapitalAdvisoryGrp.com. The views and opinions expressed in the preceding paid pre-recorded program are those of the host, callers, and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of this station, its management, or owners.